Hello and welcome to Talking Business, the new digital interview from Tees Business, the voice of business in the Tees region. I'm Dave Allen, and I'm delighted to say joining me this week for Talking Business is the Mayor of Tees Valley, Ben Houchen. Hiya, Ben.
Hi Dave, thank you.
We'll be coming to you 1 second, Ben, for a good chat about this. Now, before we have a chat, our thanks to Cornerstone Business Solutions, the area's leading commercial IT experts. Cornerstone are kindly sponsoring Talking Business, and we're delighted to have them on board with this one. And now, so to talk to yourself, Ben, hopefully we're going to cover a few things that people, you're not exactly low profile, it's fair to say, on Teesside, but I think there's a few things that people don't know about you, and hopefully we can talk about those over the next half an hour. Now, I know we're going to talk about your working life, but before we rewind, I think it's important for you to give us your view about the current situation that we're in. You know, we're obviously in unprecedented, difficult, challenging times with the COVID pandemic. How much has your challenge in your typical week changed since this crisis began, and this new normality came into being?
Well, I think for all of the projects that I've been working on and we've been working on for the last couple of years now, we're in a strange place in that we're not losing any time as a result of coronavirus, because if you look at things like net zero Teesside, or you look at, the potential for hydrogen trains or offshore wind or whatever it might be, the steel project that we're still progressing over the last few months, the stages that those projects are at, a lot of them are desktop based. It's all about architects, planning, design, going through the regulatory processes, and all of that can be done from a computer by those businesses' consultants. It can be done by my team, remote working at the minute, because there isn't any construction as yet. Whereas had this probably happened in about 12 months' time, we probably would be facing some very difficult challenges about construction, getting people on site, social distancing. So all of the major projects are still going ahead, with the exception at the moment of the airport, because the airport's closed by mandate of government that we shouldn't be flying at the moment. But at the same time, we're also in a unique position to bounce back from that, because the first set of flights we're introducing are largely domestic. We'll have to wait and see what happens with international flights and quarantine, and we need to make sure that when it reopens, social distancing is clearly going to be with us for some time, so we need to manage that as well. So all of those things are being managed. I'm actually pretty optimistic about what the future is, with the caveat of what does coronavirus mean for people's day-to-day lives. And what we're now seeing is a new challenge facing particularly our SME businesses, of cash flow, of furloughed staff, a lot of uncertainty around what happens next. So as the economy starts to reopen, what do those businesses do? How can they bring back staff when there may be a drop-off in work? Is there going to be another spike of unemployment when the furlough scheme ends? Is the government going to put something back in its place? So I've been really fortunate that I've been invited by government to sit on its National Economic Recovery Group to feed into answering those questions about how do we reopen high streets, how do we help businesses get back to work but maintain socially distancing and look after staff. So it's an added bit of workload, but you know what? It's what we sign up for, and I think things will look very different for a period of time. But my overarching view is, whenever we get through this difficult period and when we get the vaccine and things can go back to normal, I do think things will go back to normal, and I do think we're in a really good position to be able to reap some of the opportunities that will come over the next 12, 24 months that other areas can't reap, because they're not able to look ahead. All they can do is look at the challenge that's immediately in front of them, and thankfully we're able to do both.
I was going to ask you there that, it is a period of such uncertainty and confusion, and I was going to ask you what your key message is to the businesses and the business people of the region. And I think you probably just answered it there. Is that your real key message, that there's every reason to remain positive because this isn't forever?
Well, the long term of the economy is strong. To some extent, the recession that we're seeing and the impact on the economy is artificial and self-inflicted because of the lockdown that has been put on by government. It's not because of drop-off in demand of the economy. It's not like the recession of 2007, 2008, where demand fell off and it had a massive impact. There is now a build-up of pressure in the economy that is that is not being able to be released because of the lockdown. And I do think a lot of that will be unleashed. And that's not to say, we're going to bounce back to where we were immediately, but there is a lot of built-up pressure in the system, and I do think there are massive benefits from that. So as a result, the underlying work that we've been doing over the last 3 years is still sound. The principles that we're working on for the long-term future of the economy, they're all still relevant today, even with the coronavirus. It just means we've got to manage this period to come out the other side. So from my point of view, from where Teesside is going for the future, this is a hiccup. This is a problem that we've got to deal with, but it doesn't throw us off track. It absolutely doesn't throw us off track. The big thing I want to do is make sure that we do what we can for local businesses to help them manage them through this process. And it's not perfect. It is difficult. But that's why we've launched a business survey that's gone out. And I'm sure with the wonders of technology, Dave, you'll be able to put out some links to let people know that it's there. Any local business in the Tees Valley must respond to that.
We've already done ours, Ben.
You have, absolutely. I've seen we've had a lot of responses, but we need more, because the stronger the response, the stronger I can take that evidence to government, and that can influence whether it's the support for local businesses, the social distancing rules, or what time should we open up, what industries and how do we do it. So people often find those things boring, but it is actually really important to those businesses, what their business is going to look like in the future. They need to fill in that survey.
Great stuff. I think people will certainly be reassured by that positive message from you, Ben. Now, if we can do something, move away from COVID, because we all get a bit sick of talking about COVID all the time, don't we? And if we can do something of a rewind now, because I think it's fair to say that you are one of the region's best known figures. You're not exactly low profile, and yet, and especially I think within the business community, that's the case. And yet, you did have a life before politics, didn't you? And in fact, you're a local lad. I believe you grew up in Ingleby Barwick. You went to Conyers School, and then before Northumbria University. And you even had dreams of being a rugby player. Is that true?
Grand dreams that they were. Yeah, no, absolutely. My parents were one of the first houses built in Ingleby Barwick on Village 1 at Lowfields near the Teal Arms. They still live there, actually, just around the corner. My sister was the first year intake at Winstone Primary, which is the first primary school there. I mean, the Tesco's in Ingleby Barwick, I still remember being a massive swamp, never mind the housing estate and the shops that are there now. So yeah, absolutely. And then went to Conyers, fortunately, was able to go to Conyers, a great school. And then went to university, which I absolutely loved university. But yeah, I think my first goal when I was a youngster was always to be a professional rugby player, but a bad injury put pave to that. Although many would tell you I was never going to make it anyway, so who knows?
And you didn't fancy following in the footsteps of your uncle Keith Houchen, scorer of a FA Cup final goal, which I relived on TV last week. Did you see it as well when they had the replay of the '87 Cup final on TV?
I've seen the goal plenty of times, but it's the first time I watched the actual match. It was a good final, actually. It's better than a lot of the finals that we have.
It was a great final.
At the moment, to be honest.
And what a great goal.
It was a really good goal. And if you watch that game, he actually had a really good game. He won everything in the air. I think he also set up one of the other goal that wasn't the own goal. So, no, I think he should be pretty pleased with himself. But no, my dad was always one to say he never wanted me to go into football. He didn't like the attitude, and he didn't like a lot of the grassroots football just because of the ethos and the swearing and the lack of discipline. So from like 4 or 5, I went into rugby. And by the time I took up football, I played like school football in goal because I was a rugby player, but no, I'm not a good footballer.
Having said that, you did keep your uppies better than I can do.
To be fair, that was hard. That's a flyaway ball. It wasn't.
That was in this. This is Ben Gibson's challenge to raise funds for Teesside Hospice, of course, isn't it? And I saw you doing it on Twitter or Facebook. It was fantastic. They see you're taking part, and you managed to do your 26 keep your uppies.
Well, I mean, I think Ben Gibson's done a fantastic job on the drive that he's done to raise money for the hospice. But yeah, I mean, I can do what was it, 26. It took me. Well, I did a lot of practicing beforehand, and then that was like the 6th take. So I don't think that's bad for a flyway football.
I think my average is 2.6, so well ahead of me anyway. Now, tell me about your business career away from politics, because before politics took over your life, you did have business interests, didn't you?
Yeah, well, originally when I went to university, the reason I went to Northumbria was to be a solicitor. And Northumbria at the time were the only university in the country that ran a program where you could do your undergraduate and your postgraduate together. And actually, for those that understand the law, doing your LPC, which is your postgraduate, with Northumbria saved you about £10,000 because, you know, we could never have afforded for me to do a postgraduate. I mean, we're just not wealthy. So it was a great university, great opportunity. So I was actually in private practice as a solicitor for 6 years. Started at Archer's Law in Stockton. That's where I did my training contract with Chris Todd, who's still there, and John was my principal, and I was his pupil there. So that was really good. And then I ended up, I went to BHP, was at Punch Robson for a bit, and then I ended up working in-house for one of the clients I was acting for at BHP. They offered me a job, wanted me to come and be their lead counsel in-house. And they were, and still are, an angel investor. They invest money in lots of startup businesses, and they needed some business and legal advice on setting up those businesses and the agreements, etc., and helping them in those different businesses. So I ended up doing that for a bit. And then an opportunity came along for the guy I was working for, who passed up the opportunity, and I thought it was a really good one. So I asked him whether he would mind if I, just that we decided to part ways and went for this opportunity. And it was to set up a sportswear business called BLK. Now BLK, called Beyond Limits Known, is an Australian sports brand that's very well known, certainly in the Southern Hemisphere, for rugby union and rugby league. And they were looking to expand into the UK. And so we took the UK franchise for it, in effect, and set up the UK arm of BLK. Yeah, which I absolutely loved. I mean, I absolutely love sport, any kind of sport. Absolutely love it. Business is exactly the thing that I love to do as well. So bringing those two things together was fantastic. But at the same time, it was easily and by far away the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And it just gave me, a renewed sense of kind of awe and admiration for anybody that starts their own business and gives it a go. And secondly, it taught me some really good lessons that I think have stood me in good stead as mayor, to understand what businesses face from day to day, whether that's HR issues, whether it's bank funding, whether it's trying to get new clients. I mean, the logistics supply chain, the whole thing, because we imported, all of our stuff was manufactured by approved factories in the Far East in China. And we had to manage those factories. We had to get it imported, HMRC, tax, bonded warehousing, the whole lot. I mean, it was a hell of a learning curve, but I loved every single minute of it. It was brilliant.
So it wasn't quite that you then decided to park all that and move into politics, because before all that, while that was going on, you had politics running alongside that, because you've had a long-term interest in politics, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been interested in politics ever since I was a little kid. I was always that sad little kid who would sit in the library at 11, 12 years old reading the paper. Don't know why, I just did. But I was always one of those.
The Sun, that was, or the Telegraph?
The Times, actually.
Times, right? Okay.
Look with me, the Times. So yeah, I did that. But I was always one of those kids that knew a bit about politics, but I never wanted to be a kid that got involved in politics, because I mean, the mantra that always came out of my household, because it's not political in any way, shape or form, my family, is, you know, politicians have never had a real life. They've never had a real job. They've never done anything real in their lives. Career politicians, all that type of stuff. So I was acutely aware of wanting to, you know, get qualifications, get a job, start my own business and get some real life experience, which absolutely, I mean, has contributed to what I've been able to do in this job, because without it, I wouldn't have been able to do it, in all honesty. So I mean, I'm absolutely against the idea of career politicians as a result.
Yeah, there's plenty out there, and it's good to see that. And I'm sure people will be delighted to hear that you've gone through that experience of trying to run a business and the challenges that come with it. Tell us about your briefly. What was your political career before you decided to stand to be Tees Valley Mayor?
So I got involved in politics in 2000, at the beginning of 2010. I met James Wharton, who's a good friend of mine, and helped him out on his campaign when he was running for the general election in 2010. Ended up standing to be a local councillor for Yarm in 2011, which I was successful in doing. And then I ended up becoming leader of the Conservative group on Stockton Council as well. And while all that was going on, I was also asked by the party to stand in the Middlesbrough by-election in 2012 when Sir Stuart Bell died in November, which is a hell of an experience, given it was, I think, a few weeks after the pasty tax and the caravan tax budget. Everybody hated the Conservatives. We were at 20 points in the polls. it's, centre of Middlesbrough as well. So Stuart Bell had died. It was November. It was miserable. So that was an experience as well.
You got beat.
I got beat heavily, very heavily. I came fourth behind, obviously, Labour that won, the Lib Dems, UKIP, and I beat the Peace Party by 4 votes at the
Well
time,
done.
which I was relieved
I
at.
thought, well, it could have been worse. I thought you were going to bring in the monster raving lunatic party there or something, but so
The
at
Peace
least there
Party,
was no.
to be honest, Dave. So I was pleased to have beaten them.
That was almost the equivalent of the time I did the Middlesbrough 10K and was almost beaten, but I managed to get a sprint going at the end when 2 people dressed up as the Transporter Bridge tried to overtake me in the sprint finish. But like you, I just held on. So you stood there, and and then eventually you were nominated to be the Conservative candidate for the Tees Valley Mayor, and I think, is it fair to say that not many people probably gave you too much chance?
Well, I mean, before that, I stood in the European elections in 2014, but the way that the system works, I was never going to win. I just wanted to do it to basically stick 2 fingers up at the European Union, to be honest, and have a bit of a go at them. So that was good fun. And then, to be honest, I thought, because I'd started my own business, I thought I'll take a step back and I'll if I'm still interested in politics, I might do something at the election in 2020 that was supposed to have been, etc. And then, obviously, when the Conservatives won in 2015 and David Cameron set up the Northern Powerhouse and devolution, the Tees Valley ended up getting a devolution deal in late 2016, December 2016. And I just thought, if you're interested in politics and you want to get involved, there is no better thing than to represent the area that you're born and raised and grew up in and live. So I wouldn't have done it, but for the fact that this unique post was created, and I just stuck my hat in the ring. And sometimes it's timing, sometimes there's a bit of luck, but I mean, in December 2016, nobody, including myself, thought that I was going to win. But actually, by the time you got into February, March, April time, I mean, so to give you an example, Dave, the business that I was running, when I was elected on the 7th of May, I sold the business on the 8th of May because I'd already prepared to sell the business, thinking actually I was in with at least a 50-50 chance of winning. So I knew that I had to kind of sort that out because I wasn't going to be able to do both things. And the business partner I had at the time was really understanding. We managed to come to an arrangement, and he was also willing to take the uncertainty that obviously had I lost, that would disappear. But had I won, which I did, then he was going to take over the business and run it, which he ended up doing. So yeah, by the time the election day came around, I absolutely thought I was in with a shout.
It's history now that you did get in, and it was you caused major ruffles within politics at the time. And now I know that your role as mayor is wide ranging, but I think I'm right in saying that perhaps the 2 most high profile focuses for you have been the airport that you've already touched on, but also this huge project through the South Tees Development Corporation and the old steelworks site to bring that back to life, to bring investment and jobs to Teesside in the long term. That remain right at the forefront for you?
Yeah, the airport is always going to be central because as a politician, if you stand on an election pledge, you've got to deliver it. And that's why it is the number 1 priority, because it's the priority that the people elected me on. And yeah, it's closed at the minute, but it will reopen. It'll reopen as soon as we're able to, and in a safe and appropriate manner. Flights will start again. And that's also the benefit of us owning it. Whereas I think a private sector business might take a more cautious view than we're able to take, because we understand the benefits it doesn't just have to the airport. I mean, this is the whole thing that my opponents, especially the Labour Party, just don't understand. It's not about the airport. The airport is a piece of infrastructure that is essential to the rest of the region succeeding. If you don't have good connectivity into the region, how do you attract more businesses? How do you attract investment? How do you go and see clients and bring clients to you that aren't just in a 20, 30 mile radius of you? You've got to have good connectivity. So securing that is essential and always will be. And we've got some really exciting plans coming up over the next few months about really doubling down on doing better things at the airport. So I've got no concerns about the airport at all. But the Development Corporation, like I say, I mean, we're still progressing with the world's first carbon capture and storage project. I mean, basically that's going to take 6 million tons of carbon out of the atmosphere every year. That's the equivalent of more than 2 million homes. It's the first of its kind in the world. It will absolutely put us on not just the UK map, but the world map as an area that you would come and develop and build a business in clean growth, low carbon technologies. We're in some final discussions with government about hydrogen trains, which, let's be honest, has been kicked into the long grass in the last few weeks because of the coronavirus, but we're starting to have that conversation again. And that is a site that, again, it's not just about that site in Redcar. That is a site that will have massive impact across the region. And a great example, real example that we can point to now that we've won the CPO, we now own the land as of, 10 days ago, whatever it was, is that Seymour's, a fantastic local contracting firm from Hartlepool, are now being contracted on site, local business, local lads getting work, clearing up, preparing the site, and building a roundabout into the first 100, 150 acre site. So it's not just about the benefits it'll bring to Redcar. This is money, jobs, and it'll grow the local economy for the whole of the region from Hartlepool, Darlington, and everywhere in between.
Sounds like you're excited, and that you feel that everybody else should be as excited as you are too.
It's the biggest challenge we have actually in the role, is to get people to understand the genuine size and nature of this project and what the effect it's going to have on the region. And it's quite difficult because even some of the projects we talk about, like the carbon capture thing, even when I say it, I can kind of feel myself saying it in a way that some people will glaze over at. But if they understood it, would think, wow, that is absolutely game changing for the world, never mind the Teesside economy and the hydrogen stuff we're talking about. So my view has always been in life, I like to talk, as you keep reminding me, Dave, but I think the best thing to do is to demonstrate delivery. And as we start to deliver some of these projects, let people feel and physically see the tangible benefits that it will bring. That's the best way of doing it. So we're just getting on with the job, and I'm really excited to say that in the coming months there'll be more and more good news and more local people employed and more local businesses getting the benefit from what is an amazing site.
And in terms of numbers and the figures and the facts around that, what are the key numbers that you say over the next, is it 5 or 10 years that you're aiming to create there?
Well, the original plan was 25,000 jobs over the next 25 years as we develop out the whole of the site. But what's becoming increasingly clear, especially now that we've got ownership of the site and we're starting to accelerate delivery, is I genuinely don't think any longer that this is a 20-year horizon. I think this project can be delivered in 10 years. I actually think it can be actually delivered out in that 10-year period. And wow. I think those jobs won't just be created on the site. They'll be created in places like Stockton and Hartlepool and Darlington as well. And loads of existing businesses will see the massive benefits that come from it, because, I mean, it's not going to happen, but even if we had all of the interest that we've got and all of the commercials we're currently going through with investors, if all of them came off, we don't have enough land. We actually don't have enough land on the 4,500 acre site that we currently have. Now, let's be honest, they're not all going to come off. They never do. That's not how business works. But that's an amazing place to start when we haven't, yes, we talk about it a lot locally, and still a lot of people don't know about it locally, but we haven't marketed this site. We haven't taken it to the US or Africa or the Far East, and we haven't sold the site to businesses and industry to come and invest in Teesside. And already we're inundated with genuinely viable commercial businesses that are going to create many jobs. So even if not all of them are successful, we are confident that this is a site that's going to be a huge success, which is why I do believe that we could accelerate the full delivery of this site from 20 years down to 10.
Brilliant. In T's business polls for that last 2 years, you've twice been voted the region's the region's business by the region's business community as the T's region's most inspiring business person. And that's by T's business readers, your fellow business leaders, ahead of the likes of Steve Gibson and Alistair Powell and Bill Scott. Yeah. How does that make you feel when you see that? I mean, one or two people said, well he's not a businessman.
Well, yeah,
no. A business leader, though.
Well, possibly. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that, I mean, part of a politician's job is to make sure that people are aware of the work that they're doing, because people with politicians complain when they don't know and don't hear from them. So you've got to make sure that you're keeping in touch with people to tell people about what we're delivering. And when you deliver big, high-profile things like the airport, that makes a big difference. But I mean, to be honest, that poll would be very different if, for example, people really understood the likes of what Steve Gibson actually did for the region. I mean, I work with Steve because he's on the Development Corporation board, and I know Steve very well. And we talk often about what he's doing in his business and across the region. He just doesn't tell anybody about it. He's not out there the same way that I am advertising myself. And if people
We know that, Ben. Just to interrupt you there, we know that. We keep asking him to come and tell us, but it's not Steve's style, is it?
well, to be fair to him, I mean, he's a very assertive character, but he's also a very shy. You know, he doesn't court publicity in the same way that many of us do. But I mean, he's just one example. I mean, what the likes of Alistair Powell does, absolutely amazing. I mean, Andy Preston, before he was mayor, I mean, I think he's come in the top 3-5 for the last, you know, however long it's been running. You know, the stuff that Andy does and did, amazing. Sharon Lane, you've already mentioned, an unbelievable business leader running Tees Components in East Cleveland. I mean, it's just about profile, and it goes back to that point that I've always made since elected, that businesses and business leaders do not tell their story enough, because if they did, they'd get more recognition, and two, the community around them would take more pride in what their communities are able to deliver, not just for Teesside, but for the rest of the UK and the rest of the world.
It's an interesting point that you make there, isn't it? Because, you know, I think we're in a similar boat here, and that we often find ourselves saying, how come we don't know about that story?
Yeah.
Because it's such a fantastic story that surely it's good for the whole region to know that, and trying to convince and arm twist some of the people behind it to say, look, let us tell this story. And I know, and you must know this, there's some stories that we would love to tell that are out there, and we haven't got the permission to tell everyone, and yet it'd be a great fillip for Teesside to be able to.
And I think one of the things that people often don't realise as well is it's not necessarily about them. You know, what they've achieved and everything is fantastic, but it's not about their ego. It's about you sharing your story and your success as a local person, local business, employing local people. That has a huge, it brings people together behind that. It gives the community, it gives people in the local area confidence and inspires people to do it themselves. It is that kind of adage that if people can see somebody from their area like them succeed, it gives them the confidence that they can do it as well. And unless they talk about it, then, you know, the community around it doesn't see the successes of an amazing area like Teesside, because we're not talking about it. And the more we did, the more success we would actually have, because people would be inspired to follow the amazing leaders that we've got in the region.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you there, Ben. Now, of course, but for this pandemic, there'd have been a certain election this month, wouldn't there? I'm not sure what the date was. When should it have been?
Forgotten now. Is it 7th, 8th of May? It was
right.
A week before.
So you'd either be starting a second term in office, or you'd be kicking your heels and wondering what you're going to do next.
Looking for a job.
Seeing if that sports career is still on a go, or whether maybe getting your old rugby boots out again to see what the back injury is feeling like nowadays. So, I mean, given that, obviously it's now been postponed for another, so you're going to be Tees Valley Mayor for another year. So I'd be two questions here. One is, what do you want to achieve in that year? And I know there's some big ifs around what happens over the pandemic. And secondly, do you see your career continuing in politics long term now, or do you ever foresee yourself going back to, for instance, business?
Well, over the next 12 months, I will continue to progress and deliver as much as I can, because you're right, Dave, I don't know how long I've got in this job. I'll obviously be standing for re-election whenever the election may be, hopefully as soon as possible. And hopefully I'm re-elected and can continue. So with the next 12 months, I'll just continue to push on and deliver as much as I can. I'd like to get into the delivery of things like the free parking promises that I made for the election that was supposed to be last week. I think that is something that absolutely can be just one part of our response to helping the recovery of the high streets, getting people into town centres again, as and when it's appropriate. And I think making it easier for people to access high streets and lowering the cost of entry through free parking is going to be essential. So I'm already talking to some of the councils about doing that as part of the recovery plan, which I think would be good. I want to get to a stage where, okay, we may or may not get spades in the ground, but even if we don't, I want to get to a stage where delivering steel making back to Teesside is done, as in we have signed it and it is now just to be delivered. It is not an aspiration anymore. And I think that is absolutely that we can deliver that in the next 12 months. And already speaking to some amazing businesses that want to do it, and we're going to see how far we can get as quickly as possible. Again, because the stage that you're at in trying to land those businesses, it's about commercials, it's about land values, it's about where do they go, it's about what the demand is, what the supply chain looks like. It's about costs, it's about design, it's about planning, etc. And that can all be done. That can all easily be done by this time next year. So I would like to have thought that there is a public announcement of a private sector investor saying that they are going to be making steel in Teesside again. And I think that absolutely can be done in the next 12 months. So I think those two things, and then depending on how the pandemic pans out, and this is clearly subject to government, but I would love to see Teesport or the Teesside area get a free port as well, which could easily be announced in the budget in 2021, subject to how the virus continues to develop and how long it takes us to get it in hand. Because the government is still progressing that as a policy. There's still a consultation out we've responded to that finishes in July. The next stage will be, where should they go? And we'll be bidding for that as well. So, I mean, I'd love to see those three things ticked off before the election next May.
Sounds like it could be an exciting 12 months, and it's certainly going to be an interesting 12 months, isn't it? But one more question that I want to ask you. So I think that one thing that we obviously speak to a lot of businesses, and often your name comes up. And one thing that people are always impressed by is the fact that you seem to be incredibly knowledgeable about the local business scene. That somebody asks you, name three great things that are happening in three amazing businesses. Now, I know you'd reel those off and come out with a few amazing statistics behind it. But is that come from a love for these things? Because people often just say, "Well, how does he know about all of those businesses?"
Well, it's genuinely like any job. I mean, if people run their own business or they have a job, if you are genuinely enthused by that business and that job, then it's not a job, is it? It's a lifestyle. It's a vocation. And I mean, I absolutely love this job, and I eat everything up about it. I mean, I'm a nosy bugger as well, so I love to know what's going on in people's businesses. Because I used to run my own business, I absolutely know that there were lots of mistakes that I made, lots of things I got right. But being able to go into a business and see how other people do it and understand their processes, I just love to soak all that up. And also, there's nothing more inspiring and nothing more proud than being able to represent and hopefully add value to an area that is your home. I mean, why wouldn't? If you're interested in politics, I don't understand what drives that. And I loved working with Archers and BHP and Punch Robson, and I loved running my own business. But waking up in the morning and being able to jump out of bed and get on with the day, it's the only time in my life that I've ever felt like that. I mean, I like my previous jobs, but this is something different. And when it is something different, and when it is something that you're so enthused and excited by, I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is like being a professional rugby player, a professional footballer for me. It's exactly what I would love to do, and I'd love to do it for the rest of my life. But that's up to the people of Teesside, Darlington and Hartlepool.
Watch this space, as they say. Well, that's all that we have time for this week on Talking Business, in association with commercial IT experts Cornerstone Business Solutions. Our thanks to Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchen for joining us and giving us such great insight into what the challenges and what the future holds for Teesside. Next week, we're going to be joined by somebody that Ben knows well and works closely with. That's Phil Forster, here to talk about Teesside International Airport, the big challenges and what the future holds for our region's airport. So do tune in then. In the meantime, thanks for joining us on Talking Business. See you next week.